Hey, Shalom, Makim, Shalom. First and foremost, as always, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachakodash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone that taught us his truth and that's what teaching his truth. Much peace, love, and salutation to the elect, beginning with 144,000, all the way down to the large multitude that believes, and who the Lord will deliver in these last days. To you all I say Shalom. I'm the brother Tazamah from the Great Millstone Dallas camp, coming back today with another lesson. And I pray this lesson will be edifying to the elect. And I want to do a lesson on a series of screenshots that was sent over into our chat. You know, the Elder Yashawama sent them into our chat. And, you know, when I seen these screenshots, you know, this just further shows forth and proves how Esau Edom, the so-called self-proclaimed white man, all right, when he's going to be backed into a corner, all right, the Spirit of the Lord on the left-hand side is going to be placed upon him to completely go balls to the wall hard to try to uphold his Edomite supremacy. All right, because Esau is being found out and searched out. All right, he's being found out and searched out to be the devil. You know, as the scripture says, as a matter of fact, let's actually open up with this one. There should be a shameful spewing shall be put upon his glory. All right, this is the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse let's start at verse 15. All right, it says, "Woe unto him that giveth his neighbor drink, that puttest thy bottle to him, and makest him drunken also, that thou mayest look on their nakedness." And this lines up with the scripture in Jeremiah 51, where it says that Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. All right, all these various different philosophies and quote unquote, you know, democracy, you know, that's been spread, which really has been, you know, wine to make these different nations inebriated, beginning with the Israelites. You know what I'm saying? Salaki, I don't know why it's chiming like that. But yeah, it threw me off. Salaki, I was Satan. But yeah, so pretty much all these different philosophies that these various different nations have engulfed, you know, in regarding to Esau, you know, beginning with the apple of Yahweh Bashim Shai's eye. All right, the nations have become drunken, you know, and everything is completely backwards. You know, that's why the scripture says with the turning of things upside down shall be esteemed as the potter's clay. You see, and Esau's being found out to be the devil, man. That's why we call him the devil. That's why we call him the devil of what the Bible speaks of. Okay, it's a man on the planet Earth that will be doing particular things that the devil would do. Okay. All these various different ideologies and just rebellion against Yahweh Bashim Shai is promoted. Okay? Verse 16, it says, "Thou art filled with shame for glory." You see that? Thou art filled with shame for glory. You see, because what's ultimately Esau's glory, beginning with the elite. You know, because the rest of these Joe Blow, you know, these Budweiser drinking 6-pack Edomites. When I say 6-pack, I'm talking about a 6-pack of beer. I ain't talking about no 6-pack in the belly. All right, but these, you know, these everyday Edomites, you know, they think that, you know, their history, you know, their history has been brought out to them in the forefront, and they like to say, well, that was in the past, but now, you know, they're wanting to be more proud about their Edomite supremacy. You know, they're being more proud about their Edomite supremacy and the things that they have done on the planet Earth. You know, the rape, robbery, and murder, the bloodshed that they shed throughout the world. You know, how America was established. You know, slavery. They try to lie about that and say that we came over here as pretty much as indentured servants. You know, we came here to the Americas on boats to work for free. You know, but that's not the case. You know, and Esau, and that's why the scripture says also too. Let's get this one real quick. Let's get the book of Psalm 73. And Lord willing, this lesson ain't gonna be too long, but let's get Psalm 73. All right, verse 6. It says, "Therefore pride compasseth them about as a chain." All right, and that pride goes into, you know, them, you know, setting up monuments, statues, you know, landmarks that are particular American trademarks today. And it was how that landmark was established was off of the sword. When you look at Mount Rushmore, where they blown they ugly ass faces into a mountain, you know, certain Gadites and, you know, individuals of the northern tribe, they call that Slaughterhouse Mountain. Why do you think they call it Slaughterhouse Mountain? Well, due to the fact of the individuals that got slaughtered for them to even be able to put their faces into that mountain. Yes, you have places called the Devil's Punch Bowl. You know, you have what is it, Rosewood, if I'm not mistaken. You know, Black Wall Street. Okay, and various different other places where, you know, it's been looked at and deemed as a American landmark. Okay, but a lot of blood had to be shed in order for Esau to attain a foothold in that particular plot of land. Now, at the end of the day, it was prophecy. The Lord gave Esau the sword to do it, but now all his atrocities, you know, which have been being brought out, a lot more is being brought out, and we can thank Yahweh Shema Shah for the internet for that. You know, it says their pride compasseth them about as a chain, violence covered them as a garment. You see. And that's what Esau is known for. He's known as the man of sin. He's known as the bloody man. You see, it says that they're continually gathered together for war. Salakia. But it says that they're continually gathered together for war. He is the man that rides upon the red horse with a great sword in his hand to take away all peace from the earth. That's Esau. You see, and then recently Donald Trump just came out and stated that those monuments that got put down, you know, that got taken down, I'd rather say, like statues of Sam Houston and, you know, particular statues of Christopher Columbus. Recently, Donald Trump just stated that those statues will be put back up. You see, and that's what all the whole "Make America Great Again." That's what that all goes back to, or that Edomite pride. And you have particular individuals like you see here on the screen, all right, exuding that Edomite pride. All right, so once again, going back to Habakkuk 2, we'll get to the pictures. It says, "Thou art filled with shame for glory." You see, it says, "Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered." You see, now all your atrocities is being uncovered. All your lies and your deceit, the things that you've perpetuated on the planet Earth to be deemed as truth, is now being showed forth to be a lie. Now your foreskin is being uncovered. Now your uncleanness is being shown. Now white people, you know, so-called white people, because they're not really white, but now these so-called white people, now they're saying that, you know, pretty much it's pretty much to a degree like hate speech if you call somebody a so-called white man or woman. Being called so-called white now today is equivalent to being called a nigger or something like that. Why is that? It's ultimately because these curses are now starting to fall upon our enemies. You see, it says, "The cup of Yahweh's right hand shall be turned unto thee, and shameful spewing shall be on thy glory." All right, let's get a few words here. It says, "Shameful spewing shall be on thy glory." Shameful spewing is kwayak lawan. All right, now the root word is from kwalawan, right? So you have kwalawan, kwalawan, right? It says disgrace or shame, okay? And then it says here, yeah, disgrace, all right? Which that's that shameful spewing is a disgrace. There's a stain on Edomite supremacy. There's a stain on Edomite history. There's a disgrace on your name. You see? And a lot of these times they like to say, "Oh, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. That was my fault. That was my ancestors, but that wasn't me. If I was back there, I would have helped." That doesn't take away the fact of the judgment that's going to be, that doesn't take away the fact of the judgment that's going to be poured upon you. The scripture says in Isaiah 14, prepare slaughter for his children for the iniquity of their fathers, because you ultimately are your forefathers coming back, and we don't give a damn about how bad you would like to say, "Oh, well, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. If that was me back then, I would have did that. Hell no." You know? Well, what's the scripture say real quick? I think it's Sirach. I haven't gone through this in a minute. It's either Sirach 40 or 41. Actually, just for the sake of time, let's just type it in. "They shall complain of an ungodly father." Yep, Sirach 41. This is the book of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus, chapter 41. Let's start at verse 6. Let me start at verse 5. Hey, remember, because the scripture says that the wicked are estranged from the womb. As soon as they be born, they go about speaking lies. And that's talking about the Edomites. Okay? Sirach, Ecclesiasticus 41, verse 5, it says, the children of sinners are abominable children, and they that are conversant in the dwelling of the ungodly. It says the inheritance of sinners' children shall perish. You see that? The inheritance of sinners' children going to perish. Prepare slaughter for their children for the iniquity of their fathers, right? The inheritance of sinners' children shall perish, and their posterity, meaning what? Their children, shall have a perpetual reproach. See that? So even their children, your great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers and grandmothers and y'all ancestors, they had slaves. They was doing all, they was at picnics. Look up the true history of a picnic, right? They was at picnics. They was doing all these lying on Jake. You know what I'm saying? Look up stories of Emmett Till. And particular Jakes that, like another good movie that kind of symbolizes that is Mississippi Burning. Val Kilmer, he recently passed away, which I believe he was an Israelite. His father goes back to Irish descent as well as a Cherokee Native American Indian, but we'll see. But that's another good movie. And I believe that was actually based upon a true story, if I'm not mistaken. All right, it says the inheritance of sinners' children shall perish, and their posterity shall have a perpetual reproach. The children will complain of an ungodly father, because they shall be reproached for his sake. You see, you catching a blunt of what your forefathers did, but you ultimately are your forefathers coming back. So when we out there on the highways and hedges cursing your ass out, for all your atrocities that your forefathers did, ultimately, at the end of the day, it was you that did it too. Because you are your forefathers coming back. And there's no escaping the judgment. Okay? Now, yeah, so let's go from here and let's read some of these comments real quick here. My apologies. This is a post, right? That somebody posted. Salakia, hold on. My bad. Let me do it like this. All right, so this is a post on X from Jeremy Koff. It says, black crime being driven by socioeconomics is false. Now you got to ask yourself, all right, excuse me, what is socioeconomics? You know what? Let's do it like this. Let's just do it like this. Break down what how you spell that shit? Socio, right? Economics. Break down what socioeconomics are plainly for a beginner, right? I could have easily went to Google, but let's just jump over here and see. It says, sure, right? This is ChatGPT, of course. Here's a plain and simple breakdown of socioeconomics for a beginner. What is socioeconomics? Socioeconomics is the study of how money, economics, and societal factors are connected and influence each other. So the amount of money that you have, right? The amount of money that you have can determine the society that you stay in. Now, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, which we are the Israelites, we're regulated to the ghettos, to the barrios, to the hood. Now, not all of us live in the hood. I don't live in the hood. I don't live in the ghetto. The ghetto. Talking about the ghetto, right? The ghetto. Yeah, I don't live in the ghetto. You know what I'm saying? But I don't live in the nicest place either. It's like I live in a very, middle class, medium place. But is it still now? If you live in Texas, those of us that know here in Texas, is where I live is definitely not considered Highland Park. It's definitely not considered Frisco, Texas. It's definitely, I live next and around Castle Hills, but I'm not in Castle Hills. And Castle Hills is nice. Highland Park is nice. Frisco, Texas is nice. You see? So it says it looks at how people earn and spend money, how wealth and poverty affects people's lives, how education, jobs, race, location, and family backgrounds influence someone's economic situation. You see that? And the education that so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, jobs, the location, and family background definitely influences the younger generations that are coming up. And it's systematically set up that way. And Esau purposely set it up that way by regulating Jake to what? The projects. That's why it's called a project. Okay? I might just do something on that later. You know, as a matter of fact, because I know I got Grok here. Let's see. Damn, I got to do all this bullshit. Never mind. I'll do that later. But it says, example, imagine two kids. One grows up in a wealthy neighborhood with good schools and access to healthcare. The other grows up in a poor neighborhood with fewer resources. And that's mainly us. You know, most of us have grew up in poor neighborhoods with fewer resources versus those that, you know, that have the benefits, for lack of better words. And it's funny that what the word ghetto means, it says that a ghetto is a neighborhood that's regulated to the Jews. You see? So that's all spiritual. Okay, it says why it matters. Socioeconomics help explain how these different backgrounds can affect their chances in life, like getting a good job or staying healthy. And that's 100% true. Why it matters. Understanding socioeconomics helps us see why inequality exists. Because inequality does exist because everybody's not equal. Okay? And why everybody's not equal is because ultimately what? You have the curses. Okay? Make better policies to help people. You see? And the best policy to help us out ultimately at the end of the day is Yahweh Shai returning and destroying the system and putting us back in our top position. Okay? Understand how the economy affects everyday life. You see, because with us being consumers, that means that without the consumer, there will be no American economy. And the main consumers that build up this place is the ignorance built upon subjugating the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. We are the biggest consumers too. Okay, so going back here. It says black crime being driven by socioeconomics is false. But how is that false? Based upon the definition of socioeconomics, is true. When you don't have the money, when you don't have the resources, when you gotta steal. I mean, we're not advocating that at all. What does the scripture say? It makes you think about this. And what's that? Proverbs 30. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Yeah. Proverbs 30:7 says, 2 things have I required of thee. Deny me them not before I die. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. You see, but we're regulated to poverty. Hey, the scripture says that he will leave in the midst of us an afflicted and a poor people. You see? It says, feed me with food convenient for me. And the food that's convenient for us ultimately is the scriptures and the understanding of the scriptures. That's why Job said, let me get it real quick. More than my necessary food. It's either Job 23:12 or 12:23, one of those two. Okay, so it has to be 23:12. Right. Job 23:12, it says, neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. I have esteemed the mouth of his words more than my necessary food. So ultimately we got to eat, we got to drink water. We got to eat, to make sure that we're maintaining this society. But, the scriptures that we have, via Yahweh B'Shem Shai are really our true water. It's really our true food. As the scripture says, he that believeth upon me, as the scripture hath said, out of his mouth shall flow rivers of living water. Slack you. Hopefully it's still recording correctly. But let's go back. Black crime, air quotes black crime, being driven by socioeconomics is false. Poor blacks commit crimes at least 3 times the rate of whites. Wealthy blacks commit crime at 5 times the rate of whites. So they're saying that if you're a wealthy black individual, a wealthy Israelite, I'll just put it like that, that you commit crime at a 5-time higher rate than so-called whites. But when you look at the percentage of so-called wealthy whites and so-called wealthy blacks, air quote, the ratios is far different. Blacks commit more crimes at all income levels. You see? And that's probably true. That is probably true. You see, but when you look at the number of wealthy Edomites compared to wealthy Israelites, the number is drastically lower. You have more Israelites that are regulated to, low class or middle class, which there really is not a such thing as middle class. If you quote unquote are considered middle class, you're really in a state of being low class, honestly. You see, versus those who are upper middle class or high class, you don't really have Jakes in that position. Not saying you don't have any Israelites in that position, because you do. But the number compared to Edomites compared to Israelites are different. Now, this is from Stu Peters. If you're white, you carry the blood in your veins of men who conquered the world. Whites must rise up. You see that? That's that spirit that Yahweh Bashim Shah is placing upon them. You see, the devil shall come down with great wrath because he knows that he has but a short time. Now they're trying to regain. Now they want to regain that Edomite pride. Let's read that again. If you're white and Edomite, you carry the blood in your veins of men who conquered the world. But how was the world conquered? The scripture says the earth was given into the hands of the wicked. You see? So you're right. You did conquer the world, but the world was conquered with the sword. You completely used deception, murder, bloodshed, rape, robbery, deceit, idolatry to completely subjugate and conquer the world. So he said, we must rise up, right? Based blondex, this so-called Edomite looking women, right? I've never heard of a wealthy black area. I've never heard of a wealthy black area of living, which is true. You don't have it. Now, we did have our own, city. Let's do this. What happened to Black Wall Street? Black Wall Street refers to a thriving black neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma called Greenwood during the early 1900s. And during the early 1900s, we know what was going on during this time. Apartheid, It says it was one of the wealthiest black communities in the U.S. at the time, home to successful businesses, doctors, lawyers, schools, and banks, all black owned. So we had our own, businesses, doctors, lawyers, schools, banks. We had our own things, right? But what happened to it? On May 31st through June 1st, 1921, a violent racist attack destroyed it in what's now called the Tulsa Race Massacre. Here's how it went down. An accident sparked tension. A young black man named Dick Rowland was accused of assaulting a white woman in an elevator. And it's always the so-called white woman, the Edomite woman, the white woman. It's always her too. And you Shedemites, man, you ain't exempt. You have a lot of men who are locked up, a lot of men who were put to death, castrated, hung, made a mockery based upon you just lying. So you're not exempt, man. You see, the charges were never proven. The charges, were never proven. It was never proven. It was always something that was based upon hearsay, right? Mob violence broke out. White mobs gathered outside the courthouse demanding Rowland's lynching. Black residents showed up to protect him. Tensions exploded. So they came to attack. And then you had Jake that rose up against them. But we're at a time right now where Jake is the scripture says in Genesis 49 that Judah is a crouched lion. He's an old lion. He is crouched down. Who shall rise him up? But there was recently, not saying this was justified at all by any means. I'm not using this as justification. But when I read it, because I went to school in Frisco, Texas. I went to high school in Frisco, Texas. You see, but I'm originally from Ohio, from the Canton, Cleveland area. But my junior and senior year, I moved to Texas. And I went to Frisco High School down here, which, like I said, if you in Texas, you know about that area. It's a nice area, you see. But there was recently a stabbing that happened out there at a track meet. It was a Jake, that stabbed a so-called looking Edomite, or a so-called looking white man. Looked like it could be an Edomite, but the Jake's name was Carmelo Anthony, not the basketball player, but that's what his name was. In this Edomite, so-called Edomite, so-called white, he looked like an Edomite, but maybe he was a Jake, I don't know. But he was a track athlete, a star football player, and you gonna see. It says destruction of Greenwood. Over 18 hours, white mobs looted, burned, and destroyed Greenwood over charges that was never proven to be facts. But mind you, this is what Esau does worldwide. He does this on national levels. He did this in Libya. He did this in Iraq. He did this in Afghanistan. He did this in Yemen. He tried to do it in Syria. He did it in Venezuela. He does this worldwide. That's why the scripture says that he enlargeth his desire as hell and as death. Esau does this worldwide, and he uses lies to justify conquering nations and peoples with the sword. That's what the so-called white man does, man. 300 plus people were killed. Exact numbers are still debated. It was way more than 300 plus people. Thousands were left homeless. Businesses, homes, and churches were destroyed. They completely just destroyed people, man. You see? Government inaction. No one was held accountable. Insurance companies refused to pay claims because the destruction was labeled a riot. So even and insurance is wicked as hell too. You pay hundreds of dollars a month on some what if type shit. And insurance ultimately goes back to, I don't know why I say ultimately twice a lot, but insurance ultimately goes back to having insurance on slaves, man. Like, look up the history on State Farm. Look up history on the Barclays. Look up history on this kind of stuff. Why it matters today. It was erased from history books for decades. They don't teach about Black Wall Street at your schools. They're not going to teach about that. They may touch on the Trail of Tears, but they don't really go into the history of the Trail of the Trail of Tears. The Devil's Punch Bowl. They don't go into history on that. Look up the Devil's Punch Bowl when you get the chance. It's a powerful example of how black success was met with violence. You see, when Jake was thriving, Esau wants to come in and tear down. You see, it shows the deep impact of racism and economic destruction on black communities. The effects of that loss of wealth are still felt today. But look at America on a macro scale. Not a micro scale, but on a whole scale. And not even just America, various different nations throughout the four corners of the earth. That's how Esau get down, man. That's his MO. That's his mode of operandi. You see? I've never heard of a wealthy black area of living. Apparently, there might be a couple. You see, this is Sam Parker, whoever the hell this is. I don't know. Apparently, there might. You see the little asterisk by it. There might be a couple. Where? People be like, man, Atlanta, ATL. Atlanta. That's still a small fraction compared to Esau. You be like, man, Jake and ATL winning. No, they're not. You may have your little few here and there. But on the macro level, absolutely the fuck not. No. It says, is there even one single affluent, clean, safe black neighborhood in America? I know of none. Because there's not. Why is Chicago known as Chirac? Not just the city of Chicago, but particular suburbs of Chicago and particular hoods. What's that one hood where that one guy was from in Chicago? Not Trey Block. What's that guy's? King Von. Forgot where that guy was from. But when you look at Chicago, shit, Dallas is the murder capital of the United States. Dallas, Texas is the murder capital. When you fuck around in Oak Cliff, Highland Hills, South Dallas, Pleasant Grove. Those are areas that you don't want to be in. Those are areas you don't want to be in like that. Shit, Deep Ellum. Deep Ellum used to be nice. There was a shooting out. There was some shit going on in Deep Ellum last. There was some shit going on in Deep Ellum last night. That was on the news. There was a shooting in Dallas last night at 2:00 in the morning. Right after the brothers got done preaching. Later on, a couple hours later, somebody got shot. And brothers was like, man, it's a wicked vibration out here tonight. Dallas is the murder capital. Detroit, but these are all places where Jake is at though. Predominantly. It says, that Montgomery County, they say. I don't know. I Googled the crime rates there. They're pretty high. And that's Jake there. Montgomery, Alabama. You go to Montgomery, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, man, that ain't no place where, man, I'm going to take a vacation. I'm going to go to Jackson, Mississippi. Ain't nobody trying to go to fucking Jackson, Mississippi. Only reason why Jake would want to go out there for brothers, I'd rather say brothers want to go out there is to see the mighty men of Mississippi out there preaching, you know. But I mean, what's going on in Jackson? Like nothing. Alabama, like no, it's just really just low down, right? What a repugnant display of white guilt. Disgusting. This is a human being thing. This person made a bad choice. Father of Austin Metcalf, and this is the individual right here that got supposedly smoked or he got stabbed at a track meet. You see, I was today years old when I realized that we are living through a white genocide. now they're not but the thing is, it's a so-called white genocide. It's a so-called white genocide, but also too at the same time we are called minorities. It's a so-called white genocide, but we're minorities though. My eyes are open now. I love being white. White lives matter. Stop trying to erase my people. Well, look at what your people did on a worldwide scale. They don't want to acknowledge that fact. You see? That's why ultimately you goddamn devils, man, you Edomites, the Lord gonna fuck you up, man. And Yahweh Shema Shah gonna destroy your red asses, man, because you ain't even white. You're really red. You know? But I just wanted to do a quick lesson on this, man. I pray this lesson was edifying to the elect. Once again, I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Chakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders, the great millstone that taught us this truth and also teaching this truth. Much peace, love, and salutation to the elect. Until next time, I say shalom.